Oh, ho, ho, it's time to get spicy, isn't it, my filthy little loutsers? Today we're going to look at games that upset Mother, Father, Uncle Sam and his government to boot, because the games on this list were pretty much designed to cause a stir. Now, I'm not saying that all of these are as shocking today as they were back then, but trust me, these ruffled a few feathers and caused many a monocles to be dropped in thick oil. With this in mind, I'm Jules for WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 most controversial video games of all time. Number 10. The Grand Theft Auto series. No gaming franchise has courted controversy quite as consistently as Grand Theft Auto. It even has an entry in the Guinness Book of World Records for doing just that, right alongside most cartridges blown, which is held by your mum if what she did to me last night is anything to go by. There's my one per list. Since 1997, GTA has allowed players to commit nearly every immoral act under the sun. Carjacking, gun crime, torture, drug dealing, and violent assault are order of the day, much like a Glasgow upbringing. This has led to many a parent and politician getting in quite a tiff. However, despite their posturing, only one nation has actually banned Grand Theft Auto outright, and that's Thailand, which blamed it for the murder of a Bangkok cab driver in 2008. It's done nothing to harm sales though, and recently GTA 5 racked up over $1 billion in just 3 days. Mad. Number 9. 6 Days in Fallujah. When Konami tied up with developers Atomic Games for a realistic tactical third-person shooter set during the Iraq War, the output was so controversial that it never made it to store shelves. It didn't matter to people how the game played, the fact that it was a gamification of a real war that was still ongoing at the time of its potential release generated a hatred for being callous and insensitive. The military itself weighed in on the subject, labeling the game as flippant and devaluing the efforts and suffering of those who were still serving at the time. Eventually, the media spin was so intense that Konami pulled out and left Atomic Games adrift, which then led to its eventual closure. Number 8. The Mortal Kombat series. Blah 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 blah, ESRB rating, blah 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 blah, depiction of incredible violence, yeah. This was the stuff of parents' nightmares at the time, and got so much negative press that Korea, Malaysia, Germany and Brazil have all banned Mortal Kombat games across the franchise. Number 7. Custers Revenge. It's actually quite impressive that developer Mystique managed to cause so much offense with little more than a few dozen primitive pixels and a limited color palette, but that's literally the only impressive thing about Custers Revenge. This was a nasty bit of smut that joined the ranks of quite a few other sex games on the Atari 2600. However, what made it different was that it wasn't actually a sex game, because it was a rape game. Players took control of the eponymous American Civil War general and were tasked with assaulting Native American women as many times as possible. For obvious reasons, the game was met with protests from women's rights groups, Native American groups, and other activists. Eventually, this game was pulled from shelves, and the developers were even sued by Atari. Number 6. Night Trap. Nowadays, this is little more than an example of terrible acting, but at its peak, Night Trap was the game not to tell your parents about. In this FMV-heavy title, you had to save these lovely lasses from sci-fi-style vampires by setting trap for evil predators. The mix of schlock, horror, and half-naked women still rattled cages though, and Night Trap was pulled from shelves at Toys R Us and FAO Schwarz. Sega also slapped it with a sales ban for a while, only later to reissue it with a new box art. However, by today's standards, the girls have more gear on them than the average World of Warcraft adventurer. So, yeah, pretty tame. Number 5. Postal II. Postal II tried to be one of those long exercises in bad taste that allows players to murder innocent civilians in various gory ways and even urinate on their corpses for fun because, animals that played this game really needed the primal urge of pissing on what you kill. The game was roundly criticised for its tasteless humour, and the nation of New Zealand was particularly offended by it. Not only was it banned for sale there, but possessing a copy was made an offence. However, the biggest offence really out of the whole thing was that Uwe Boll made a film out of it. Grim. Number 4. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. We all know the mission I'm going to talk about, and even if you sit there saying that it's not offensive, to some people it really was. The No Russian level finds players deep undercover with a group of Russian terrorists, and they need to take part in a civilian massacre in order to maintain their cover. Although the sequence can be skipped, and it does come with a content warning, this is a particularly unsettling moment in FPS history. Sure, gamers had gunned down countless enemy soldiers before, but never a group of innocent bystanders as they ran and screamed. It's sparked outrage among some, particularly in those who refused to take it in context, and was removed entirely from the Russian version of the game and modified elsewhere to serve players with a game over screen if they were to fire on the civilians. Number 3. Manhunt. From plastic bag suffocation to genital mutilation by sickle, the killings that you could kick out were depicted in ultra-realistic fashion, and players were scored on the grisliness of their slaughter. So yeah, actual gratification through violence. How could that go wrong, eh? Needless to say, an adult certificate did little to quell the moral panic Manhunt sparked in certain circles, and this reached a critical mass in July 2004 when the game was linked with the murder of a 14-year-old lad. Now, the connection between the murder and the game was dismissed, and Rockstar did go on to release the even more brutal Manhunt 2, which itself was banned in New Zealand and Germany. Number 2. Doom. The original Doom wasn't the first FPS title to hit the market, but it exploded the genre into the mainstream and was a lightning rod for controversy from day one. Doom wasn't just slammed for its depiction of graphic violence, but by church groups who took issue with its satanic imagery, and therefore the game was banned in Germany in 1994. The peak of its notoriety came though in 1999, when it emerged that the perpetrators of the Columbine High School massacre were avid Doom fans, and this therefore thrust the video game violence discussion back under the spotlight. Doom, though, is still going strong to this day, with the head of Bethesda recently stating, "If you're not into violent video games, Doom's probably not the game for you," which is basically the media equivalent of saying, "F you." And number 1, Hatred. Now, this was a game designed to piss people off, as the isometric shooter sent players on a genocide crusade, which is basically a fancy way of just saying, kill everyone in the world, no matter how helpless they are. Health was regenerated through the execution of incapacitated civilians, and the camera switches to a cinematic viewpoint when the coup de grace is delivered for maximum shock value. But you know the worst part? It's that this game was boring. If you wanted to play this to boast to your mates about epic kills, then good luck to you, because that level design was less brutal and more boring.